for being here this morning. I know it's awful cold. I didn't expect there to be anybody here but Brian. So I'm pleased to see all y'all. Last week we went through the first 8 verses of Genesis, which is what we're talking about. And when we finished, we had just got through talking about how in verses 4 through 8 that God had divided the heavens, had taken the water out of the atmospheres and put water on the earth and water into the sky. He had split that up. And at the end of that, verses 1 through 5 was the end of the first day. So what we want to talk about this morning is we're going to talk about time. We got to have an understanding in time, I feel like, before we move forward through the rest of the Bible. So at the end of verse 5, it says, well, let me just read that. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And evening and morning were the end of the first day. All right. There's a lot to talk about here when you look at all that. First of all, the word day that it is referring to in Hebrews was the word yom, Y-O-M. And as you know, the Bible was interpreted into English, I believe, from the high priests from the Roman Catholic Church into the King James Version of the Bible. And there's a lot of discussion here on exactly why and what they interpreted and in the way that it's written today. God called the first, well, they say that God called the first period of time day, and that it ended with evening and morning. Now, what was Yom? Yom is referred to in the Bible over 2,000 times. I can't sit down. I have to stand up. I'm sorry. I have to walk a little bit. Yom is in the Bible over 2,000 times. So what does it mean? Well, the scholars interpret it to be a day, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But actually what it means is about 10 different things, and it's found throughout the Bible as such. Yom can refer to as a period of time of unspecified length, as found in Psalms 90 and 10. It's a long but finite span of time, which we would refer to probably as eons. It's also referred to as a year. We find that in Exodus and in 1 Samuel. It can also be a day, a 24-hour period from sunset to sunset. And this is a cool note. Back in the day, their day, we consider a day from morning to morning, more or less. You start your morning, you end it at nighttime, and you start over again the next day. That's kind of our beginning. Back then, they went from sunset to sunset. So when you read this and it says it went from evening and then morning, that was because that's the way that they saw their day, from sunset to sunset, not more sunrise to sunrise like we do. I thought that was cool. So Yom can also mean a period of light contrasted with a period of darkness. It can also mean a point in time, and it can also mean a span of time. So where in that is a 24-hour day really as what they interpret it to be? You have to remember that in 2 Peter 3:8, it said that one day of the Lord is equal to 1,000 years. Come on in. I know.
I think we should. I like it. It's cozy.
This is a nice backdrop for it as well. I'm really in the mood
I like it.
visually.
Let's vote.
Put them on.
Stand right this
Here we go.
Now that I've watched so many videos of McKenna, I'm like, I think he did the purple first, and the brown on
Oh,
top,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
and then put that on top.
I know.
I'm like, I wonder if that purple was a later or started.
Hi.
You know,
Coach, you stand up.
Yeah,
she has some artist she
I
likes.
know, I should know.
I need to sit down. I've been standing all weekend.
I bet you have.
I don't think we played one game above 41 degrees.
Get the jet heater in the dugout.
We did until Coach Williams got real mad because we didn't play very good, so he took it out.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
The heater.
They'll play better if they're cold.
Is that your punishment?
Well, they might as well be cold if they're not playing
They're
good.
not going to play good. They're not going to get anything good.
There you go.
Here it is.
They're all cubby around that
Uh-huh.
heater. Don't focus on the game.
Looks like it's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I locked it because the wheelchair was in front of me, but I moved the wheelchair. So it's all good.
All right. Did we all get in?
That seemed like.
Because I was saying in 2 Peter 3:8, one day with the Lord is with 1,000 years. So as we know, time doesn't really matter to God. We all know that. We've talked about that quite a bit. But what you see is that they interpret it as morning, as evening, and morning, and it being the first day. Well, why did they do that? Well, part of it, the Catholic Church was trying to fit it all in a nice little package of a day of the week, and that day being 24 hours, and then those days being a week. In the morning and evening, we think that they said day because it was interpreted that the beginning and the end of that period was interpreting as an evening and then a morning, and that had to equal a day. But actually and truly, what it really means and what it should have meant, or as you read it, is that there was a beginning, there was an end, and that was the end of a period of time, is the way we see it. Their use of a day was derived from their interpretation that there was an evening and that there was a morning. But the conflict with that is not there was not truly an evening and morning as we understand it, because we don't get an evening and a morning, so to speak, until we get into verse 14, when there was actually where he actually establishes day and night, and we start having seasons of the years and stuff like that. So you really don't have morning and evening at this point, but it was their interpretation of the beginning, of saying the beginning and the end, and then they put that into a day. So it was their own Catholic's little package of why it's read like that.
Hey, Randy,
Yes.
could be going off track here. What, so, the Sabbath is this Saturday, right?
Say it again?
Sabbath is Saturday.
Yes.
So what's, I've been told my whole life what the reasoning that's the Sabbath is there is why.
Seventh day of rest.
Okay, so did the Jews kind of gerrymander their way into the time thing as well? Does that make sense?
No?
Because,
Tell me what you're saying.
well, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If it was always,
If-
And I didn't explain myself very well.
If the Jews didn't have a concept of the day, how would they have a seventh day concept of Sabbath?
Well, they did have a
Is that
concept of day. Is that what you're saying?
But that was the reasoning that God rested on the seventh day, right? So are they the ones that kind of put it into a 24-hour time
Yes.
capsule?
Yes. Yes.
So the
As
Hebrew
well?
word is yom, but it's translated as day. But yom can mean a span of time. It could
Yeah.
be
But they-
thousands of years.
But the Catholics, the ones that interpret it to English from Hebrew are the ones that labeled it day.
But you think about our day, our day can have the same meaning when we use it metaphorically or how we
Yes.
choose to use it. And that's where we run into a crux, I think, just from the Hebrew classes that I had. Most of the Hebrew teachers stated that when they said day here, as they translated, it meant 24-hour period.
Right.
But then I had other professors who would say, well, that's not my interpretation as I read the idiomatic phrase here. And so it's very challenging to be able to determine. And it goes whether you're a theistic evolutionist or whether you're creationist, or it depends on what background you're coming from and how you choose to interpret a
Exactly.
language like this.
Exactly. And I think they did it for simplicity, but, and again, I think that they came up with the word day because they had interpreted the beginning and the ending of that period as evening and morning, when it should have just been said, there was a beginning, there was an ending, and this was the period, the end of the first period of time. But instead, they labeled it as a day, and I think they got the day because they labeled it evening and morning.
And it's more of a symbolic thing for them?
More of a symbolic thing, and yet again, you have to put yourself back in their time. We're talking in 1400 BC. What did they understand? How, what would have been best for them to understand? Okay, we had the beginning, and we had an evening, and we see that was one day. Okay, that was a period right here. So now we start the second day. It's very simplistic, very easy for the shepherd or the housewife, anybody to understand that there was a beginning, there was an end, and there was a period, and then we go into the second. But this is the words that they used. Well, I didn't know that, and then that was the reason for the clarification this morning, is because when I was growing up, it was a 24-hour day. And I just don't think that it was truly that way when you see geologically how things were formed, how things were made all over the earth, that it didn't happen in a 24-hour period. Could it? Yes. And do I feel bad? And in the beginning, I actually did feel bad that for even thinking different-wise. Was I changing the words of the Bible because I didn't think it was 24-hour day? I mean, was I taking that on myself? Am I being blasphemous? Am I wrong for thinking that? And I don't think so. Again, the whole subject matter is not a salvation question, so,
Yeah, I didn't mean to derail you.
Really
I agree.
no
I don't
realism to
want
it.
to bog down on that. I just thought it was interesting that that's how it seemed like that's more of a symbolic thing
it is.
for them.
It is, and we're not, and we don't clarify that enough when we read
Yeah.
through that, because we just kind of blow through the verses, we really don't analyze. And that's a great point. It really is just a symbolic thing. And Marty read something to me, I'll read to you here in a little bit, which I think is even a better read of that. So, while we're talking about time here, geologically, from what we can tell from all the scientific evidence that we've tried to prove over and over and over again, we talked about the Big Bang a couple of weeks ago. So, the universe as a whole, as we can calculate it, the very best, is 13.8 billion years old. 13.8 billion. Billion. That's a lot. That's a lot of time. I was going to get into how we calculated that, but I don't think it's important, so I'm going to skip that. Well, the Earth, as we know it, is 4.8 billion years ago old. So that means that it took 9 billion years now. Try to wrap your mind around that. 9 billion years to get through the first couple of verses of the Bible. For the creation to happen from the Big Bang to the point where the earth was made, to the point that we're at right now, after he separated the water and the, we have bypassed 9 billion years at this point. And all this can be proven scientifically. This is part of what John Clayton was so adamant about, that he was trying to disprove and ended up proving through his studies. So if the earth is 4.8...
I'm confused.
Okay.
You said the Earth is 4.8 billion years old,
Mm-hmm.
but it was started 9 billion years ago.
No.
The
it's
universe.
14.
No, from the Big Bang started to the point that we're at right now has been 13.8 billion years.
And the Earth was formed after the Big Bang?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I thought we came out of the Big Bang.
Well,
There was
no.
just like this
No,
little ball.
no, it took like 9 billion years for all that to happen, because it was all just gases and particles.
Oh,
They had to
okay.
collect together, pieces came together, they
was
swirled
formless.
around. Huh?
It was when it was formless.
It was formless.
Okay.
There's a,
Let me ask a question, because it's kind of
Marty.
intriguing.
this, Marty said this to me yesterday, and I think it really may answer what you said. They have this in the Grace Museum, and it says, before time, chaos reigned in a disordered bottomless abyss, in an unmeasured depth. What existed was a useless, ineffective vacuum without continuity. It is this indescribable darkness that God created. God moved upon the chaos and the waters of the chaos, and suddenly, without warning, the creative nature of God burst through the darkness. And he goes on to read the rest of the verses. So, in the beginning, it was just, we don't know. I mean, it
Well,
was just
Genesis-
unformed,
Genesis 1:1 says it was without form.
it was without form.
And that
So all
that
you
would
have-
make sense. Is for
all
10
you
billion
have-
years it was there, but it wasn't the Earth.
Right.
It was
It
formless.
took all that time for galaxies to
Mhm.
be created, for the planets to be created, for the stars to be created. Because we refer to this as we go through Genesis account of light. We talked about last week how, light was created, but it wasn't until verse 3 for it actually reached the earth. Well, how many years was that? That could be a couple of billion years before that actually happened to reach earth. So if the earth is 4.6 billion, I hate using these point numbers. I kind of, in general want to just say 4 billion years. But I feel like I need to put the 0.8 or the 0.6 word to be more accurate, because when we're talking about the Bible, I just feel like by not doing so, I'm not doing it justice. But nobody likes to hear all these numbers, I know.
1.8 billion years is a lot of years.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of years. It's 800 million years, as a matter of fact, So the best that we can tell is that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. The oldest rock that has ever been found and dated was from Australia. It was in about 5 or 6 years ago. It was a piece of zircon, and it's measured to be 4.4 billion years. Well, we know that it took a couple 100,000 years probably to cool the Earth enough to start forming rocks beneath the surface. So we found a rock over in Australia. It was a piece of zircon, and it's aged at 4.4 billion years. Well, how do we know this? Well, scientifically, and this is something that God's given us, there's 651 different ways to date things. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but you've heard of carbon-14 dating, you've heard of DNA testing, dating. What they used on this was uranium-238. And I'm going to take you back to science class just a little bit. Uranium-238 decays at a rate, well, when it's totally decayed, it's 4.8 billion years for it to totally decay. What does it decay into? It goes into lead. So you have atoms of uranium, and they throw off electrons. As they do, they eventually, and I'm generalizing this rule, it becomes lead, the chemical lead. Everybody knows what lead is. Well, they found this rock. They took a piece of it, and they actually, let me back up. So when you find a rock that has uranium-238 in it, you know that it's been decayed to some degree by the time you see it. So you take that whole, and you take percentages of that. And that's what they did, is they went in there, they found this rock, and they, under an electron microscope, they counted every single atom. Every single atom. It took them a couple of years to do that. And then they took the percentage, and then they were able to equal it to time. So they had seen that uranium-238 lasts 4.8 billion years. It was almost all gone in this sample. It was almost all lead. Now, not all lead is formed this way, y'all. But in this case, when you see it with uranium, that's how it happens. So that they were able to determine that, since this is mostly lead, there's only a bit of uranium left. They were able to calculate that rock was actually 4.4 billion years old. So almost the exact same amount of time as what we think the Earth was 4.6. So that's the oldest hard thing that we've got a hold of to date our Earth with. And then they throw in a couple of 100,000 years prior to that for it to all form and cool like that. That's how they do that with the counting things. Something else that was interesting that I was reading about the dating, to throw this in here, because there's going to be questions about, well, how do we know how old so-and-so is? How do we know this? Just throwing this in scientifically, because again, I think God gave us the brains and the knowledge and the technology to use these things that He couldn't have explained to them long ago. The same way we're talking about uranium turning into lead, carbon-14 dating is the same thing, and it's used on organic material. Anything that was ever alive has carbon-14 in it, without exception, and it's constant. As long as something is alive, you have a constant amount of carbon-14. Once you die, carbon-14 starts to deteriorate, and it goes into nitrogen. So they do the same procedure that they do with that, and they take percentages of what's nitrogen, what's carbon-14, and what's left, and then that's how they determine age. The life of carbon-14 is 11,000 years, or a little more than that. So it's real easy to date Indian artifacts and other living things, plants, trees, etc., by using carbon-14 dating, by doing that. Another way to do that is also with DNA testing. They've just come up in the last few years. DNA testing, you know, the DNA is in a double helix that goes round and around like this. Y'all have all seen that kind of a step ladder that goes like this. Well, as DNA, after you die, DNA starts to deteriorate. It gets to a point, and I don't have the numbers, it doesn't really matter. But as you get so far into the deterioration, the helix goes in the opposite direction. It goes counterclockwise, and then as it deteriorates, it goes straight and starts going clockwise. And then at the point that it's reached complete clockwise, then it starts breaking apart and breaking down, and you can't use it anymore. And that's why a lot of times when they try to get DNA and they say it wasn't readable, it's because it's already gone past the point and broken down.
I'm real curious real quick. I don't know much about it. How do you calibrate these methods? So you have this theory of how this works. What do you calibrate it against?
Well, they have.
No, but you only have a known period of time because you have to have something that you have a known, correct?
Right.
And then compare.
Control.
But you can only go so far back.
Well, they just say, like on carbon-14 dating, they can take a sample, they can watch it for X amount of period of time and see how much is
So is it
deteriorated.
Extrapolate that.
And extrapolate that out.
Exactly, but that's my point. Is it linear? Is it logarithmic? Is it?
I don't know. And I didn't want to get into that big of detail.
That's just where my
everybody
doubts come because I've worked in some things, and
I find
science
it very
loves
interesting.
to extrapolate, and when it starts extrapolating, the errors increase dramatically because you don't have anything calibrated against anymore.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But I feel like this is pretty accurate by what we see because they're able to take the samples of stuff and actually watch it deteriorate over X number of time, count the atoms that are left, and yeah, there's some extrapolation there because there's no way we can live for 11,000 years to see it to its end. I mean, that's just about on everything we use in dating, but we see steps of it, steps and steps and steps along the way. Is that the first bell already?
Already?
Seriously.
You got 6
You
more
had like
weeks.
6 weeks.
If you need 16, I bet we can accommodate you.
Well, let's see here. Let's just, to wrap up, like we said, the evening and the morning and the day that they talked about was actually a beginning and an end of a span of time, so to speak. So, in beginning in verse 9, which we'll get into, I guess, this next week, it's when we separated land from water. And that's when the first single-cell organisms began to show up in the fossil record. And this happened over a period of approximately 570 million years. So the first day took roughly 3 billion years. The second day took roughly 1 billion years, and we're working on the third day right now, and it's going to be roughly 570 million years And we'll get into that more this next week.
So it was really just half a day.
Just this much of a
God
day.
did it
We
by
had
noon.
breakfast and we were done.
By noon. Mm-hmm.
My question, the cynic in me now wonders
Okay.
if the day was given this term to increase the perceived power of God.
Could very well be.
Because I'm like,
Good point.
you know, it's way more awesome to think about him creating everything in 24 hours than 900 million years.
And I'm not saying that he couldn't, and he did.
Right. But I wonder, that's just the cynic.
I
that
think
is
it's-
deep inside of me that I'm like,
That's a very good point. That's a very
it might
good
not
point.
be quite as awesome if it took him
Right.
this
There's
huge.
something about the magic, the
mystical.
mystery, and
Yeah.
the distance of.
I think it's our very small minds that would limit this amazing creation and say, well, it's 24 hours versus it took 3 billion years. I think that's just our very small mind. We need to like put that into a little box that we can understand
That
instead
you can
of
kind of deal with and
like
process it.
blowing it up to 3 billion years.
But I think it also speaks to God's plurality in the sense that his words, the way he does things, it tends to blow our minds anyway. And we struggle to wrap ourselves around it. And I'll use the example of when Jesus Christ comes and he's talking to everyone in that era, and he is talking about the spirituality, the soul, the spirit that lives within us. And they struggle to grasp that concept throughout his entire time walking on the earth preaching to the people. And so, but that to me is a good example of the sense that he's saying one thing, he's meaning one thing, and they're not getting it. They're still seeing the physical stuff. They're still seeing the physicality of the body. And he's going, no, it's not about the physical, it's about the spiritual. Same thing is true here. It's not about the one day. It could be about the eon. It could be about the epic. It could be about something else. But God, in his infinite wisdom, was able to come up with a word, yom, to mean all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the history of mankind, throughout the history of the Jewish nation, yom has all of those meanings. But God knew that, and in his infinite wisdom knew it would mean something to one generation, i.e. the actual people that were walking around Moses,
Which is a point I was going to make.
and the people of David's era, and the people of Jesus, and now the people of our era. And so that as we have progressed through God's creation, that one word has been able to also grow with us. Does that make sense?
Yes,
The
very well
plurality
put.
there of
And his word tells us that his ways are higher than our ways. And he tells us in the Bible that we are not going to understand everything.
I love the concept of a living, breathing word. And when I talk to the kids, I always talk about the fact that if you can really wrap your mind around the fact that the Bible is truly a living, breathing word of God, and that as such, with each and every one of us, depending on where we are in our lives and depending on what the situation is, the living, breathing word is going to speak to you through the Holy Spirit. If you're going to listen to it, if you're going to tune into it, it's going to tell you something. It's going to speak to you.
Yes.
No matter what you're at. Because you can read the same verse 100 times. It's going to mean 100 different things depending on where you are in the Spirit.
Right.
I think the thing that's interesting about this, sorry, how much care did God put into forming this stuff if it did in fact take him that long? I mean, I think we've established the fact that he could have done it like that,
Yes.
or he could have taken this much time. And I'm interested to see where you get with the forming of Adam. You know, how much care.
Right.
So I'll let you tell us
Yeah.
later. But to think about that, I think adds a whole nother level of he can do it, but then he also was that careful about what it was. Because if you look at everything in our world, there is so much care for. I mean, it's like if you start going this direction, 100,000 miles from here, if you were off just a little bit, I don't know what. the
Oh, it
math
messes
is,
everything
but
up.
yeah.
It doesn't take a half a degree and you're completely,
Yeah. So
that's the whole thing. Well, thank y'all very much. We didn't get very far, but we'll pick up there.
I was just gonna say that even though, like, however the earth was created, the miracles that he performed were also instantaneously. So it's like a display of, if it took a long time for him to form it, for him to take the care, he healed a human body with spit and mud. You know what I'm saying? Like, he brought someone back to life. I mean, if you look at the human body at a molecular level, it's just as infinite as a universe.
It is.
And the instantaneous of healing people kind of displays that power as well. But then another joke I thought was like, if it took him 9 billion years to create the earth, we destroyed it in like a matter of days. I would be frustrated.
You know, it's something you have to realize too when you're talking about these big numbers. Humans, as far as we can tell, have been on the earth less than 200,000 years. So you think about what, and you've heard this your whole life, what a fraction amount of time we are here compared to what has been prepared for us up to this point. I mean, that is huge in God itself, that He spent all this time and all this effort, and what amount of patience that it took for all this amount of time to go by to get to the point of our little 200,000 years, you know? And down to mine and yours life of only 70 or 80 years, you know? I mean, really? Compared to the whole?
We've screwed up the planet in just 200,000
Oh, yeah,
years.
big time.
Huh?
Yeah, we did.
Wait a minute,